This morning, President Biden announced that the rail unions have reached a tentative deal with the rail companies, thus avoiding a strike that was likely to happen by the end of the week. The deal reached by the unions might not be agreed upon by the workers, and I'll get to that in just a moment, but let's give you the details on this deal. First, we should note Bernie Sanders is the one who prevented, I should say, any type of legislative action or congressional action against the workers. There was some effort to essentially get Congress involved to prevent a strike from happening. But Bernie Sanders last night decided to block any type of congressional effort to do that. Yesterday, Republican senators tried to force the rail unions to accept the deal that was given to them by President Biden's mediation board a few weeks ago. Now, the deal contained modest pay raises that, by the way, did not surpass the inflation rate. But more importantly, the deal did not change the railroad companies' draconian attendance policies. And that was really what the hangup was about. The workers desperately needed time off without retaliation to deal with any type of life emergency, any type of illness, anything like that. Now, the workers currently have no policy for unpaid sick leave. Engineers and conductors, for instance, are stuck with a points-based system where attendance rules would require them to essentially work many days and sometimes consecutive weeks or months with no time off to make up for taking, let's say, a weekend off to deal with a medical emergency or any other type of emergency. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Bernie Sanders is the one who blocked Congress and any effort that Congress could have to essentially intervene and prevent the workers from striking. And he then took to the Senate floor to give this incredible speech. Let's take a look at that.
The rail workers in the United States are not asking for 1 year of paid sick leave. They're not asking for 6 months of paid sick leave. They are asking for 15 days. 15 days. Now, the rail industry has said, as I understand it, that they just cannot afford to do that, just don't have the money. And they say it would cost too much money to provide their workers with any paid sick days. Just can't afford to do it. Well, let's see. They made over $20 billion in profits last year. They provide their CEOs with huge compensation packages. And here's something else that everyone should know who's getting involved in this issue. Last year, the rail industry spent over $18 billion not to improve rail safety, not to address the supply chain crisis in America, but to buy back its own stock. It turns out that guaranteeing 15 paid sick days to rail workers would cost the industry a grand total of $688 million a year. That is less than 3.5% of their annual profits.
So Bernie Sanders getting involved in blocking the efforts of Congress to essentially intervene and really work on behalf of the employers here was really important because that forced the employers to engage in some concessions, right? And one of the concessions, which I don't think goes far enough, does address that time off issue, providing the workers with one additional day of paid time off per year, not even per month, per year. They also will not be retaliated against for any unpaid time off they need, let's say, medical. Right?
Yeah. So, look, I don't want to assume that people know the business world. So let me just say some elementary things. So revenue is all the money you get into a company. Profits are what you have after you minus costs from revenue. So that's just money you take home, right? So if giving time off to your workers costs you 3.5% of your revenue, well, it depends on what kind of business you're running. If your margins are really tight, that could be a real issue, okay, even though the number sounds small. But if it's 3.5% of your profits, Well, that's just a matter of how you're sharing the profits of the company. And so you'd just be giving 3.5% of those profits more to your workers. Well, that's just a negotiation point about how you're going to share the winnings that you all have created together. And 3.5% in that context is a small number, a very small number. So the point that Bernie's making is indisputable, and one that you never hear in politics or media, which is all the time these guys claim, oh my God, I can't be decent to any of my employees because of the money that it would cost. Well, are you on the edge of bankruptcy? Are you on the edge of sustainability? Or are you making 20 billion in profits? So, and unfortunately, as I read a lot of articles about this today and in other days, most of the articles paint it as these strikes could really hurt the country, and it would be the workers who would be creating this problem. It never frames it as it's the companies who are creating the problem by underpaying or undertaking care of their workers. Never. And in one of the articles today, they claim that a lucrative offer had been made in another strike. You know if it's lucrative or not. The way that they just support corporations in the press is unbelievable.
Yeah, because they are corporations. The press is owned by corporations. So they don't care about the workers. And look, for anyone who isn't a CEO at a corporation, an executive, an owner, whatever it is, right? If you're against the striking workers here and you're more concerned with the impact a strike like this will have on the economy, that is the direct result of this country for decades conditioning you to think of yourself not as a fellow worker, not as someone who's also victimized by the same system of greed and, this never-ending priority of focusing on profit motives. It's because you've been conditioned to think of yourself as a consumer as opposed to a worker. But at the end of the day, if you're not the owner of a company, if you're not the head of a corporation, if you're not an executive yourself, you are a worker in your own context. And you should take a look at how you're being treated in your workplace, right? So just to give you an example, CNN, here's a tweet. This is a perfect tweet to kind of demonstrate what we're trying to talk about here when it comes to the corporate media's coverage of the potential strike. CNN had tweeted, 60,000 railroad workers could walk off the job as soon as Friday. It's about the last thing the U.S. economy needs. A prolonged strike could mean some empty shelves in stores, temporary closures at factories, and higher prices on various consumer goods. And it's all about pitting fellow Americans against one another. It's understandable for corporations to have this perspective because corporations don't care about whether or not a worker is going to be retaliated against if he or she needs to take a day off for an illness or for a family emergency. Corporations care about their bottom line. They care about the profit. That's first and foremost. But for ordinary people who are also part of this system where they get nickel and dimed, they get no benefits, they get no support, understand you might be a consumer, but at the end of the day, you're also a worker. And it's much more important to stand in solidarity with these rail workers than to go along with the corporate media narrative of, oh my God, the shelves might be empty. You'll be all right.
Yeah. But even if you're not, quote unquote, all right, like, do I want that to happen? No, of course. I want everything to run smoothly. But whose fault is it? Why does literally everyone in the media assume that it would be the strikers' fault? Why isn't it the company's fault for not paying them right, for not allowing them to have sick days? But the assumption is the workers are always wrong and the corporations are always right, and everything is the fault of the employees. It takes two to tango. And finally, the CNN, I thought that they had gotten a very important order from the new owners to be balanced. Oh, you meant balanced towards only Republicans, but not to workers, not to the poor, not to the middle class, not to the left, not to progressives, not to any of those people. Balance my ass. Basically what they told them, and I see them all obeying on TV every day, get back to supporting corporate rule, which is center right.
So I want to give you the final agreement. And again, this is just the agreement between the rail employers and the unions. The workers still have to vote on this, and there is still some dissent among workers. So we'll see how this all plays out. So here's what we know is in the deal. There will be an immediate 14% pay raise that is backdated to 2020. It also raises the total amount to 24% over the 5-year span of the contract. There are also $1,000 cash bonuses every year. It has not yet fully announced the changes that have been made to the attendance policy, but we do know some details according to what the union has, or the unions have communicated to the public. As I mentioned earlier, there will only be one additional paid day off per year. Insane. Worker protections against discipline if they need to take some time off to attend a routine or preventative medical care, appointment, doctor's appointment, exemptions from attendance policies for hospitalizations and surgical procedures. You guys just let that sink in for a second. If they had a medical emergency and they couldn't make it to work because of that medical emergency, they would be retaliated against. This isn't even a debate about more paid time off. This is just a debate about hey, if something bad happens to us and we need to go to the doctor, can we just not get fired or reprimanded for that? That's all they were asking for. And it took them literally years. It took a potential strike that would have an impact on the economy for them to finally agree to the bare minimum. But the rail workers aren't buying it. For instance, Jonah Berman, a reporter at Labor Notes, writes, one rail worker's anonymous take, it's a garbage deal. Everyone hates it so far. Nothing for me. I'll vote no. This has been a complete waste of time. And that sentiment was shared by other workers on social media as well, as you can see from the screen. Why is our union posting this like this is some kind of game-changing deal? One day is laughable. We need to strike. Another writes, the paying members didn't agree to this, and better pay was demanded also. So we'll see how it plays out, but it doesn't appear that the workers agree that this is a great deal that they should move forward on. Cenk.
All right. Last couple of things here. The reason why the unions would agree to a deal, the union heads would agree to a deal right now, is because I guarantee you, even if it's not a great deal, I guarantee you that the Democratic Party officials are yelling at them at the top of their lungs. We're about to have an election. This would mess with inflation. Are you nuts? Just strike a deal, any deal. But wait a minute, the unions give money to the Democratic Party, not the other way around. So why does the Democratic Party listen to every corporate order, but then yells at the unions to heel to corporations? So if the workers don't want it, then don't take it. And so, and understand what Bernie Sanders was doing. Corporations use everything at their disposal. They use the media to bully you into submission. They use their politicians, and they were just going to vote to say the strikers don't have a choice. They must take the deal. And it's government tyranny that's going to make them do it. We're going to take their freedom away. And Bernie said, no, you're not going to take their freedom away just because they're workers. Just imagine a world where you turned on your local news or cable news and you heard, this strike could create a giant infrastructure problem in America and exacerbate inflation. So why won't the railroad companies just pay them? They've already made $20 billion last year. This would be 3.5% of just their profits, not even their revenue. Why won't the railroad companies do it? Why are they endangering the entire economy by not paying their workers? Isn't it weird that you've heard the exact opposite 1,000 times, but you've never heard that version in American media?